highly recommend Ninja Gaiden Ragebound, which is out this week.
Nice.
What about Kronos?
Yeah, Kronos, the new dawn. Jesus.
The new dawn.
Okay, so here, yes. This is a game that I previewed, I think about like 2 weeks ago or so. And it's a name that I can never remember. And the only reason I almost read it correctly is because I have it written next to my notes that I'm reading off of for the preview. But this is a new game by the Bloober Team. This is an event that I did on behalf of MinMax, another place that I work at, just podcast streams, all that stuff. And internally, this was sort of like pitched in Slack as like Bloober's making a Dead Space.
Focus your attention. What do you see?
Giant. Sleeping.
Again.
Animals. Fighting.
Again.
Stay focused. Stay cautious.
Such is our calling.
You almost fried there. Good thing I was around. Traveler.
And I said, one thing I like, one thing I'm not so sure about. Let's go see what they got going on. For just to be brief, my history with Bloober is heavily based in the Medium, a game that they came out with a number of years ago. I did see a little bit of Blair Witch and was very underwhelmed by like the asset look and the feel of Blair Witch. So I was like, I've seen what I need to see. The Medium I took all the way through.
One of the most disappointing, like from reveal. There's a video of me completely popping when the Blair Witch game reveal happened. I was with Austin. Danny O'Dwyer got it on camera as part of a no-clip documentary because that's one of my all-time favorite movies, and I didn't finish it. I think I played maybe 45 minutes of it before I said I'm good.
Yeah, it felt really rough from the jump. It's one of those, there's games where it's like you immediately bounce or immediately pop, and that was one where I was like, this doesn't look great. The Medium similarly was plagued by, I think, a lot of gameplay issues. That's a game I did finish, a game with great ideas, but really messy execution, lots of gameplay fumbles, but I think spoke to a little bit of like what could be here. It felt like a good game was in the Medium, but a good game isn't what they ultimately made. Brings us to Silent Hill 2, which is, highly critically acclaimed, the remake of that. I admittedly did not finish that either, not out of dislike. I just kind of started it and just never really finished it. I didn't play the original, so I didn't have a big affinity for it, so not a lot to say there, but clearly Bloober the stock in Bloober socially has been going up from that, I think. So I was very curious to see what this would be like. And just to start top level, I think there's definitely potential here. I went in hesitant, like, okay, another Dead Space, especially people making Dead Space-like games. That's like where the tombstone's being carved when you say you're making a Dead Space-like, because I think it's really hard to capture what Dead Space does well. And I think a lot of, we saw with the Callisto Protocol, how much that can be a failure on your game, even from a marketing standpoint. So I definitely felt like it was a big risk to even kind of be positioned in that way at all, even if it's more anecdotally than formally from a PR standpoint. But I left wanting to play it now. That doesn't mean I'm wildly high on it. I don't necessarily know that this is going to be, their like one of their like I wouldn't say first bangers. I know some people are like Observer, which I think is Bloober also, but you know, I don't know how this is going to turn out, but I definitely left wanting to play it, which I think is a compliment because I kind of went in very skeptical. I will get into now just like the pitch on what this game is. I'm going to pull from their official website and the Steam page because I think it kind of encompasses quickly and succinctly the lore and the kind of general setup. So the pitch is, in a grim world where Eastern European brutalism meets retro futurist technology, you play as a traveler. Yeah, no, literally, I love retro futurist technology. You play as a traveler, tasked with scouring the wastelands of the future in search of time rifts to dive back in time to 1980s Poland. Survive a brutal future, travel to the past to extract people, and stop nightmarish creatures from merging into unstoppable abominations. And then this next component is your mission is to locate people from the past who perished in the ensuing apocalypse. Using your all-powerful harvester, you can extract their essence and have them accompany you into the future. Be wary, these essences have a profound
12 monkeys.
impact on your journey. Yes, the more you carry, the more haunted your suit becomes, increasing your prowess on the battlefield, but also bringing them whispers in your ear and flickers into your vision, edging you ever closer to madness. Now, I know, it's like, that sounds really exciting. And it's not that it's not, but the thing I want to jump to right now is that
simpler in execution.
I don't know yet. I will say the part that I think is one of the most interesting. There's two really interesting components to this game. I would say one is the don't let them merge gameplay, which I'll get into next, and two is what I just described, the idea of extracting people from the past, having this like choice that both has a narrative and gameplay implication. And unfortunately, I only played the first 2 hours, and it ends before the first extraction. So the thing I was kind of bummed about from this preview is it seems like this extraction part is like a big element. And I do think, you know, you only have so much time. You kind of always got to make these decisions for PR. You know, maybe they'll have other preview cycles. I was disappointed that they didn't, even if it was hands off, kind of show more of that, because I think that's the second most interesting component to their game and the thing that helps make it more uniquely identifiable. Definitely intrigued from a mechanical standpoint. You know, I'm a narrative girly, so this is obviously like, there's potential with that. What do they do with it? I have no clue. So let me get into the other part that is like the big component, and then, you know, I'll get into like the weeds of super detailed like takes on little components of the game. The don't let them merge gameplay is, I think, the shining star from this preview, and the thing that I found worked really well. So what it means is you have these enemies, you know, they're kind of mutiny, zombie-looking enemies. You know, if you've seen monsters in like a sci-fi game, you can kind of picture what these guys look like. But what's interesting about it is leaning into like that survival horror kind of thing of like, okay, you don't have that much ammo, so like, ooh, do you kill somebody? Do you run around them? But when you kill enemies in this game, if another enemy appears, like comes out of the woodwork, they can extract the essence of that dead enemy and take their powers, forming a more powerful enemy. So what's cool about this is it's really a different take on crowd control, and also a different take on what does it mean to kill an enemy. In most survival horror games, the idea of killing an enemy just means, well, I might waste a lot of ammo. Mm-hmm. In doing this, I gotta think, is it worth it? But here it's like, if I kill somebody, okay, who's around? Is everybody else kind of dead? Am I playing to kill other people? Would it be better to maybe make a mad dash? I will say this doesn't really put you in a lot of my preview time. The first 2 hours didn't really put me in like many mad dash situations. And it does sometimes, at least in what I played, have you locked into like it's combat time now. So I do think it's less resource scarce than other survival horror games are, because they do put you in combat arenas at times. But it makes crowd control really fun, really stressful, and really hectic in a way that I think differentiates it in a positive light. And it's also worth noting that you can permanently remove dead bodies. If you light them on fire, they will like disappear, and then, you know, they're unextractable as a result. But there's really fun things of like, there's different enemy types. So it's like, maybe you have like an armored one and a poison one, and the poison one eats the armored one. Now he's armored poison. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that's like really cool, really fun. And I thought, you know, it was unique. It was different, and I enjoyed what they did with it. And I think this is kind of inside baseball, but I also like that they know that they have that. Like, that was what they did, like a 15-minute presentation, like, this is the world of Kronos or whatever. And the one of the things they mentioned over and over again was the don't let them merge. One, in part because it's a gameplay tip for how you should play the preview of their game, but also like on the website, like that's very much a leading point in their PR. And the reason that I like that from a player perspective is it tells me that they know like what their game has that might make it like a differentiated title in this space. And I think that's so important. I think a lot of times you go to a game, especially one that's chasing maybe Dead Space or just any other title. And it's like, but you don't really have an identity. And while I think I want to see more of Kronos' identity come through, and that's a little bit of a critical point I have on the preview, when I played this, I didn't feel like, okay, I'm playing like a bootleg Dead Space. In the way that Callisto Protocol, whether you liked it or not, it felt very much like, clearly this is Dead, like those opening hours that I played. It's like, yeah, this is literally how Dead Space begins. And Kronos doesn't have that at all. Like, you start off, like, you come out of like a little vat, kind of on a Fallout-y style, and then you just kind of, boom, you're in the gameplay. And it just tonally hits really different. There are things that definitely feel Dead Space, like, you can stomp on enemies. Dead Space is when you stomp on corpse. That's been established. Your suit looks Dead Space-like. It has the thing on the back of the neck. Boom, that's Dead Space. And you have, like, the portal you, like, hard save at and level up. That feels like Dead Space. But there's so many other components that don't feel that way. And pull on other...
they don't, because EA's not making another Dead Space. So someone out here do it for them. Like,
but I think that's the danger,
get
though.
in on this.
Oh my god! But that's I think it's funny because, like, I think there's validity in that, but actually I'd push back against that because I think there's danger in when you chase something too closely, you lose sight of who you are. And I think it's smart that they're not going heavier in Dead Space because you're not gonna be Dead Space. If we could make another Dead Space, someone would have made it by now. So it's more important to, I think, take some of the ethos of, like, what's kind of cool about that world and how can we make it more of our own, and also pull on other elements of survival horror. So, like, there's some Resident Evil DNA in this, and that you have, like, in your save spot, you can, like, store materials. They do the, like, intense dramatic zoom in on the doorknob, and then you take the key. You're not rotating items, so they don't have that from Resident Evil. And there's even, like, and I want to be careful when I say this because I don't mean it's on this level of the game, but there's a tiny splash of Last of Us that I felt in this too, specifically scouring drawers for materials. That's something I really love in The Last of Us and any games that kind of do a scouring for materials thing. Again, yes, Rob, many games do that. I know you hate The Last of Us. And, like, the idea of looking around, like, a kind of detailed, abandoned bedroom, like, I really enjoy that. I find that kind of weirdly cozy, like a weirdly cozy element of survival horror.
Janet, like, the immersive sim genre is going to blow your mind. Like,
I'm
going to give you, you know what? I'm going to give you Thief the Dark Project, and there's just going to be a whole world of games.
Oh, just
I only played the
Dishonored.
Bad Thief game.
Just play Dishonored.
Yeah, I have to play
Don't
Dishonored
play Thief
first.
the Dark Project.
I played one Thief game, but it was, like, the bad one. So, which maybe is, I don't know how people are
Or
going to
even
think
the
anyway,
modern
but
Deus
yes.
Ex games, like either of those.
Yes,
would be
but
good
I like that. If you
recommendations.
like that gameplay, like, and that really speaks to you, there were elements of that I felt in this. And I guess like maybe one more quick gameplay thing, and then getting into kind of like cons or how they kind of all these mechanics integrate together is another element of the gameplay is like light environments or puzzle solving. You have these things called what are they? They're like time oddities or like time warps or something. And essentially what it was like in my first 2 hours was you'd engage with something and make like part of the environment like it was in the past, which mostly amounted to like debris becomes a bridge. That was kind of the extent of it. There wasn't a lot of puzzle solving is almost a little too generous for like the kind of gameplay that it was. But I think it does speak to, again, potential there, which is kind of the point of a preview session like this. It kind of reminded me a lot of the Alan Wake 2. You kind of had like the orbs that you would align. It kind of felt like that where it's not complicated, but there is something kind of enjoyable about having a little bit of differentiation within the gameplay. I think the only kind of big cons I had about the game, one off the bat, I didn't really like get a good sense of the lore and the vibes and the story of this game. I don't think that needs to be like, front and center because I think this is going to be a more mechanically focused game. But I think they struggle to like put me in this setting and like make me invested in it. And that comes from two things. One, you kind of just appear in this like out of this chamber and I'm like, okay, it's like I kind of know what's going on because like you gave me a presentation 10 minutes ago, but like it feels a little out of sorts. Like I don't get, you're the traveler again and you're looking for the last traveler, and I'm like, all right. And I think they go a little too heavy on how many notes and audio messages they have. Again, kind of in that Last of Us ilk where it's like, and that's just what I think of because it's what first comes to mind for me, where it's kind of a treat each time you find like a little note and the character comments on it, but they're spread out enough where it's like, oh, I actually will read all these. If you give me too many, I stop engaging with them. And I did feel like they gave me a few too many where I'm like, I don't care what this scientist said or whatever kind of thing. And on that note too, granted, maybe this is maybe taking the wrong lessons from Dead Space. Dead Space is such like a kind of Shelley protagonist character. Like things happen around that character, but you don't really get a sense of like who that character is. But here they have that also, but then they do have them talk a bit. And when they talk, I'm like, am I actually like a weird robot clone? Is that why I have like a weird personality? Like one of the things you say, you pick up a shotgun essentially, and your character says aloud, "Another relic found. It will help me gain an advantage in close quarters." And I was like, okay, I get it that you wanted me to know to use a shotgun when I'm in close range, but that felt like such a stiff tutorialization of that integrated with the character in awkward ways. It ends in a boss fight where I swear to God, and this can be retooled, so hopefully they will, I ran out of ammo. I could not beat this boss. I had nothing left. I was looping. It was like one of those kind of, you're looping in like a bunch of corridors. I was looping so long, and I died so many times to it, which part of that is like, I'm not the best with like gunplay. But I like at a certain point, I just had to raise my hand and say, "Is there any more ammo coming back in here? Because I've exhausted everything." And the person on the team said, the other like person playing like on the station next to you, they just punched the guy and he died. And I said, "Okay," and I did, and then he did, and that just felt weird, and that was the last thing I did in the game. And I'm like, this wasn't a good note to end on for me. So that felt like it could get a little slippery with the tooling. Similarly, I do think because it's less pushing you into resource management, this can fall into another trap that this genre has, which is having checkpointing in such a way where you can back yourself into like an unsavory corner of like, well, I know I'm in this one encounter where I kind of really need something, and I kind of barely like got by on my last thing, so now I'm low on health, I'm low on ammo, and this part that's supposed to be normal is now wildly difficult, which I know is kind of the push-pull of the genre. That's a challenge of like knowing to make those decisions. But I felt like there were times where they didn't maybe quite land where they should have, especially like this early on into the game. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of like little odds and end details that I have written down, but I think those are kind of like generally some of my main points and feelings of it. I don't know if y'all have anything else you want to, ask or gesture to that I could speak to, but yeah, I left generally like, oh yeah, I think this could be cool. Whether or not it is, I don't know, but I'm cautiously optimistic about it.
I hope they can carry some of the momentum of Silent Hill too, which is a game that also I don't have a long affinity for Silent Hill, so I played the first couple hours and it seemed well made, but I sort of stopped after that, and I want to get back to it at some point, but I'm just more of a Resident Evil person than a Silent Hill person is kind of what it comes down to. But Silent Hill 2 is a template, right? Like they did their own work on it, but they have like a really solid foundation, like a masterpiece of video game to build on. And I think what this studio has struggled with in the past is storytelling, and they're great at atmosphere, and mechanically they've kind of been kind of coming along. Even Silent Hill 2 doesn't really have much combat, right? The kind of game they're building here, all that other stuff's going to have to be operating on at a higher level for it to actually succeed and stand out. So I'm super interested to see how this game pans out. Like I'll play any Dead Space. I finished Callisto Protocol. I didn't think it was particularly good. I thought it was better. It was more maligned than it deserved. I think
it's worst foot forward.
Yes, but was visually very arresting, and the like kind of melee combat was an interesting take. And so yeah, I'm rooting for this game. I would love to have. It's rare to have a studio that specializes in horror, and I acknowledge all of the issues the studio has had in the past and the many problems people have with like the storytelling in games like The Medium. But just selfishly speaking, there aren't that many studios that like want to do like AA, AAA horror, and like that's just all they want to do. Just go sicko mode on it. So I kind of want this studio to find some really solid footing, so that just becomes something I can look forward to. Once a year at the rate they're kind of putting out games.
Yeah. I think one last thing I want to make sure I mention, it's sort of small, but it does have like bigger gameplay implications. There's a small chance there's like a setting for this, but I did glance at the settings and I don't think I saw anything. But if I'm misspeaking, apologies there. They have one of those mechanics where when you fire your weapon, you can fire it to do like kind of all right damage, or you can hold it down to max to do like higher damage. Mm-hmm. But when you're holding it down to max, once it hits max, it fires. it's not like a release. Like a lot of times in games when there's a max, it's like you hold down and then the release is when it fires. And I don't necessarily like or dislike that. Obviously it's harder to control and it makes things a little bit more unwieldy, but I think this is like also done with intentionality, but just something I wanted to flag because I thought it was something that sort of surprised me and did kind of impact, how I played, whether, sometimes I'm like, I really need to just land this, let me just fire it now, or even just how I spec'd into my character in terms of abilities and being like, okay, well, let me max out certain elements of trying to get a hold of the gunplay a little bit more. But yeah, some nice quality of life things too, I guess, as a final nod. Like you can bring up the UI at any time, but it's kind of that disappearing UI that feels very like immersive. Some really good audio design in the sound pickups specifically, like when you grab items. A couple weird audio choices, like for monstery stuff. There was one thing, I forgot what it was cued to, but it kind of sounded like a balloon being stretched out in a way that, like, I think sound design hits negatively for me if I'm thinking too hard about how this might have been made. And I'm like, this feels weird and like not an interesting way. But again, lots of good quality of life stuff, like keypad answers pulled up once you get it and you're at the keypad, giant fonts, dyslexic font, weapons that have the name of what they actually are on top of the lore name. So they'll be like lore name, parentheses, shotgun. Just little nice things like that. Audio messages that can play as you walk, which is like such a thorn in my side when it's not there in a game. So yeah, hopefully this one helps set them up towards like an era of like strong originality from the studio after a pretty well-received remake.
Last, Janet, you and I are able to follow up on a game that you and I promised to check out. Janet had me check out the demo for And Roger, a narrative